Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Hewitt podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Thursday the 14th of November here in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, the rise of Megafunds. Rachel Reeves announces plans to pool £1.3 trillion of pension savings.
Few curbs on power. The Republicans retain their majority in the US House, giving Trump's party overall control of the US government.
Plus tariff wars. Emmanuel Macron warns the EU is hurtling towards an economic confrontation with the US and China.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
The UK's Chancellor wants to create a £1.3 trillion pension pot to drive private investment. Rachel Reeves plans to bring in new laws to force smaller funds to consolidate. She told Bloomberg a bigger fund brings with it expertise.
What we don't have in the UK is mega pension funds. We don't have those economies of scale in our pension funds. Those sorts of mega funds will have the expertise to make those investments, both in start-up and scale-up businesses and in British infrastructure.
Rachel Reeves also told Bloomberg she was not going to force pension funds to invest in UK assets. The Chancellor gives her annual speech to the financial sector tonight, which is expected to outline her reforms for growth. Reeves will also emphasise the importance of free trade in her address, which comes as Bloomberg has learned officials have warned her government to be realistic about any attempt to agree a free trade deal with Donald Trump.
Republicans have maintained their majority in the US House of Representatives. The victory gives President-elect Trump and the Republican Party unified control of the elected branches of government, strengthening their hand to enact immigration controls and extend tax cuts. The announcement of the Republican sweep came as Donald Trump met Joe Biden at the White House.
Politics is tough, and it's many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get.
The face-to-face meeting was preceded by Trump's appearance at an event in Washington where he told Republicans it's, quote, nice to win. The party will hold a razor-thin majority of at least 218 seats in the 435-member House, with a 53-47 advantage in the Senate.
President-elect Trump has nominated former Democrat Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence and Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz as US Attorney General. Gaetz has been plagued by scandals, including an investigation by the Justice Department that he had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl in exchange for money. He denied the allegations and was notified last year that he wouldn't face charges. In an interview with Bloomberg, former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy predicted Gaetz wouldn't be confirmed as Attorney General, but praised Trump's other picks.
I think choices are very good except one. Look, Gaetz won't get confirmed. Everybody knows that. But when you look at a Rubio, just the knowledge that he has, being in the Intel Committee, I was on the Gang of Eight, and his understanding, even when you listen to the other side of the aisle, they say he'll make a great Secretary of State.
Kevin McCarthy says the President-elect has learned from his earlier experience in the White House and will hit the ground running.
Several Federal Reserve officials have reiterated their deep uncertainty about how far they can lower US interest rates. It comes after nuanced US inflation data out on Wednesday that was in line with expectations on a headline basis, but the annualised 3-month core rate picked up. Increasingly, monetary policymakers say that the point where interest rates won't harm growth, which is known as the neutral rate, might have risen since the pandemic. Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari is one of them.
I've been surprised at the resilience of the U.S. economy in the face of seemingly quite high policy rates. Yet the labor market has stayed strong and the economic growth continues to surprise us. So for me, I've been asking questions about where's the neutral rate for the last year or two. For me, as a policymaker, that's what's leading to my own uncertainty about where is our ultimate destination.
Kashkari's comments were echoed by Kansas and Dallas Fed presidents Jeff Schmidt and Lori Logan. Despite the uncertainty on the horizon, traders see an 80% chance of a cut at the next Fed meeting in December.
Bitcoin briefly spiked above $93,000. Investors are putting money into the cryptocurrency as a bet on possible interest rate cuts and Donald Trump's policy agenda. Future Perfect Ventures founder Jalak Jobanputra says Trump's election has given the market confidence.
There was a lot of uncertainty on whether we would have a crypto-friendly administration here in the U.S. The answer is a resounding yes. And so I think we're seeing all this pent-up demand. The fact that we continue to see it rise, I mean, we've seen a little bit of profit taking, but overall, Ethereum, Bitcoin, Solana, which is the base of a lot of these DeFi applications, they're all up significantly and continue to rise.
Joan Putra adds there's been a surge of momentum behind meme coins, especially Dogecoin. Bitcoin's price later fell back below the 90,000 mark as traders took profits, but analysts expect the trend to remain higher.
Now to Europe. The French president has warned that Europe risks being divided by Donald Trump's economic policies and being thrown into a simultaneous trade war with Washington and Beijing. Macron says the US will continue to be protectionist under Trump, but his ideas put Europe at risk of being caught up in the US-China trade war.
One thing could be tariffs for everyone. The other could be to force Europeans to separate more quickly from the Chinese. That's when there'll be a risk of division among Europeans, depending on the sectoral interests of different countries. Some, which are very exposed to the Chinese market, will say, it scares me to leave the market too quickly, while others, who are more dependent on the American market, will give in more quickly to pressure from the federal government. But we're clearly entering a world of tariff wars.
Speaking alongside the former ECB President Mario Draghi at an event in Paris, Emmanuel Macron also warned that the EU should, quote, synchronise its financial regulation with the US. The European Union and the UK are facing pressure to delay or soften a planned increase in bank capital requirements as Donald Trump's victory is likely to ease the burden on the US competition.
Marine Le Pen may not be able to run in France's next presidential election as she faces an embezzlement trial. The leader of France's far-right National Rally Party is accused of using EU funds to pay her own political aides. She has denied all charges. If found guilty, prosecutors are seeking a 2-year jail term and a ban on her running from office for 5 years.
Now, those are our top stories for you this morning. In terms of the markets, so thinking about yesterday's close, US stocks wavered and then the S&P 500 was little changed. The real news was the CPI, which came in line, but it was quite nuanced. Markets moved to price a Fed cut in December. 2-year yields rallied 5 basis points. And then you had that surge in Bitcoin above $93,000. We've fallen back below that this morning, though. We're trading just above 90,000. In Europe, the stock 600 ended in the red, down 1/10%. European stock futures also up this morning, 0.2%. And again, in the Asian trading session, the dollar has hit a 2-year high. Just looking at the euro, sinking towards 1.05 this morning, 1.0552. Gold has fallen for 5 sessions in a row, and you continue to see losses in Asia for stocks, especially the Hang Seng, which is currently down 1.5%. So those are the markets, Stephen.
In a moment, we'll have more on what to expect from Rachel Reeves' Mansion House speech. Plus, we'll discuss the latest political developments in the United States. But I also wanted to mention another story that I've been reading this morning. After ChatGPT, are we now preparing for Action GPT? This is the firm behind the popular AI tool, said to be working on the next iteration, which is one that can actually do things for you, as opposed to just telling you what it's going to do or giving you a description of it. So it could book flights or write code even. Sources have told Bloomberg it's codenamed Operator. OpenAI planning to release it as a research preview in January.
Yeah.
This is part of a broader industry push towards agents or AI software that can do multiple things for users with minimal supervision.
Well, that's the main thing that I took away from this story. This word agents that I must admit I've not heard of before.
Do you not have an agent, Caroline? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, if only, but maybe this would be quite useful. An agent, somebody who can do all of those tasks for you, wade through all of the user interface of the flights and so on.
But then you have to become good at delegating. That's the other problem, which is something I'm definitely not good at. It's worth pointing out other companies are working on similar projects. Anthropic are using one as well, which can take control of a user's computer in real time. OpenAI, though, has also been looking at a set of tools designed to send emails and manage records for workers too. So this is a process that's moving very quickly.
Yeah, can they manage my enormous haul of photographs, I wonder? Let's see. Okay, that's one of the fun, interesting stories that we've been reading this morning. Let's also get on, though, to the UK Chancellor, who's going to give her first Mansion House address tonight in what's being billed as a wide-ranging policy pitch. Rachel Reeves plans to introduce legislation to pool £1.3 trillion of pension savings into Megafunds. This in order to unlock £80 billion of extra investment to boost growth in Britain. Our UK correspondent Lizzie Burden spoke to Rachel Reeves ahead of today's address, and she joins us now to discuss. Lizzie, great interview, big sit down. This is a major change now that's being proposed for government pension funds, but how exactly would it work?
Well, thank you, Caroline. It was nice to get a bit of a preview of this Mansion House speech tonight. The Chancellor framed the pension reforms as continuity of what her Conservative predecessor Jeremy Hunt did. But she said the difference is that Labour's actually going to legislate, not just consult. And that legislation, she says, is going to come in the spring. So the idea is to pool the 86 local government pension schemes together to make a big enough pot that actually it creates significant returns for savers and it drives economic growth. And it's based on similar examples in Australia and Canada. When you look at those examples, it shows that the mega fund, as she's calling it, has to be at least 25 to 50 billion pounds worth to reach that critical mass. And indeed, the IPPR think tank says that doing this is going to help lift the UK off the bottom of the G7 investment league table.
Rachel Reeves, though, also rejecting the idea of compelling pension funds to invest in UK assets, something that we've been discussing for, it seems like, a fairly long time now.
Yeah, so there are two issues I raised with the Chancellor. Yes, you can get economies of scale by pooling pensions, size matters, but then you've got to encourage that money to be invested here in the UK when you could get juicy returns elsewhere. And you need to get more money into the pots in the first place at a time when, thanks to Reeves's budget, employers are already facing higher national insurance contributions, a higher minimum wage bill, potentially interest rates higher for longer because this is a fiscal loosening, according to the Bank of England. Though they didn't say quite that it would keep rates higher, but they did say it would be inflationary. Look, she didn't have answers to those questions, so it's not immediately clear why her plan will work where her predecessors failed.
What else are we expecting from Rachel Reeves tonight? This is the big set piece speech that chancellors get to give. The Lord Mayor hosts it. We're going to actually be speaking to the brand new Lord Mayor later on this morning. What else are we expecting from Rachel Reeves tonight?
Well, this is her big moment to set out her vision for the square mile as part of her plan to accelerate growth. So building on the budget, building on the investment summit, and one thing we're also expecting her to do is tighten her grip on the watchdogs and cut red tape. So the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said at the Investment Summit he would march through the regulators. They're going to set out new guidance for the PRA, the Prudential Regulation Authority, and the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, the remit letters. And when we've been talking to executives, many of them have been talking about forcing the regulators to view competitiveness as a primary objective in their decisions and revive the idea of the call-in power so that ministers can override the regulators. That was floated and dropped last year. It'll be interesting to see if that comes up in the Mansion House speech, because it would require a change of legislation, so it wouldn't be immediate. The other theme that is going to come up tonight will be, of course, this is a Donald Trump world. He's coming back to the White House in January. Rachel Reeves is going to champion free trade because, of course, Labour's really under pressure to preempt his protectionism.
OK, Lizzie Burden, thank you very much for joining us, our UK correspondent, Lizzie Burden.
Now let's go to the US then. The Republicans have retained their narrow majority in the House of Representatives, giving Donald Trump and his party unified control of the elected branches of government. The news came as the president-elect announced more names for his administration, which have stirred controversy. The Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz for Attorney General and Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democrat turned Trump backer, as his Director of National Intelligence. Our EMEA News Director, Roslyn Matheson, joins us now for more. Ros, good morning. What does a Republican-controlled House, Senate and presidency mean for Trump's legislative agenda?
Well, it's a boon, obviously. It doesn't mean everything just magically goes through, of course, but it does mean less of a brake, potentially, on Donald Trump's policymaking and his power, particularly on domestic matters like immigration and tax. For example, there are very big expiring tax provisions, and Donald Trump is keen to see those extended and further cuts enacted. So likely to face less resistance through Congress on some of those policy makings. And also, if you look at Elon Musk and this new role about cutting government regulation and red tape, Congress can play a role there too, because a lot of regulation is bound up in law. So if you reduce it, you need Congress on side. But equally, it is a very thin margin, especially in the House, and not every Republican sitting in Congress is a big fan of Donald Trump or a supporter of all his policies. I guess the question is, are they prepared to cross the floor and vote against him? Because Trump prizes loyalty, as we know. They might find themselves on the out if they disagree. But either way, it looks like we could have quite a fractious process in Congress with significant delays. But then again, Congress has been operating that way for years at this point. In theory, though, this is obviously very good news for Donald Trump.
One of the issues that might challenge the unity of the party is going to be confirming some of the names that Trump has put forward for key jobs. Matt Gaetz being picked for Attorney General, one that has raised a few eyebrows, including from the former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who's told Bloomberg that he won't get confirmed.
There is a lot of bad blood between the two of them, of course, Gaetz and McCarthy. I mean, because obviously Gaetz was the one behind McCarthy's removal as Speaker last year. But it's likely to be one of the more controversial picks in a lineup that looks quite controversial overall, because Gaetz has been the subject of a Justice Department probe into whether he had a sexual relationship with a young girl in exchange for money, 17-year-old girl. Gaetz denied those allegations. But he's also been under a House Ethics Panel investigation, and he's resigned, so that ends that. We don't know exactly what the process for Gaetz will look like, but we do know that multiple Republican senators are quite doubtful about this choice. So that points to confirmation challenges ahead. And of course, in the confirmation process, all sorts of things can come to light. You have to go through an FBI background check, a lot of scrutiny, and it's a very key post because Donald Trump's loathing for the DOJ is well known. He's very keen to get in there and make a bunch of changes, and also to get it to deploy his policies around immigration and border security. So he can't really afford for this to go too wrong here. But certainly you can expect to see quite a tricky and complicated confirmation process for Gaetz in this case.
And then outside of the US, Bloomberg's been reporting on how world leaders have been recalibrating their diplomatic strategies. I mean, in the days since Trump's victory, and we've got the G20 gathering in Rio in a few days' time.
Well, that's right. And we know that Donald Trump is not a traditional leader. So the way you communicate with him is different. I mean, he's famous, for example, apparently he takes on board the very last thing that's said to him in the room. So everyone wants to be the last person, the person who says that last thing. And he'll speak to the people he wants to, because he really prizes personal and direct communication. So in the UK, for example, we know that he had quite a rapport with the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. Is Boris Johnson the person he just keeps ringing up to find out about what's happening in the UK instead of Keir Starmer? And he's very off the cuff. In the minute, if he thinks he wants to talk to you, he'll just grab your number and call, which is a bit trickier for those without a mobile phone, like the president of Brazil, Lula, for example. So how you talk to him and how you deal with him are outside the norms of a lot of protocol, because he's very transactional. And if he feels he's had a poor encounter in the past, it can be very hard to get past that. I mean, there's no rapport, for example, between him and the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz. So you can imagine leaders thinking very quickly, how can they deal with Donald Trump in this second presidency? And a lot of leaders trying to race there, physically to get in front of him very quickly.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.